So
well,
we set off into
within
the white.
watch community, I think it's a fairly good representation too. Because again, I'm less concerned with watches that are trying to. See, and this is where it gets dicey, because technically, homage or homage watches, however you want to call it or pronounce it, are watches that it's like, hey, we appreciate what they did with this, so we're going to copy that and then charge less for it or what have you.
Oh, but is it an exact copy? Because that's still cheap to me.
No, it's not. Sometimes, like genuine.
Because if it's like it's inspired by that, but then I don't mind that at all.
And see, I don't either. It's like, okay,
there we go. I found the rest of the plot.
If you're taking inspirational cues, sure.
Oh, we got backup too. Why are you going back up the hill? I just came down the hill. Not you. I'm talking about them. Don't shoot them. They're your guys.
Running. Well, I'm shooting them because they're cowards.
Oh, and now the enemy.
Would you like to know which of them are cowards?
Whoa! Scarab! Scarab, or is that a scarab? It's something big.
Anyway.
Oh, it's a dropship. Never mind.
I think, but when it comes to something that is a direct, especially when it actually parades as the genuine article, that's when it really grinds my gears. When it's like, okay, you're not even now saying, oh, we're this knockoff that is just charging less and owning that at least. You're now going, no, this is a Rolex. It's like, no, it's very clearly made in China.
You just don't like the Chinese market.
Okay, it's hardly fair to say it's solely the Chinese. I mean, I've seen this happen in...
yeah, but it is, that's a
obviously,
big chunk.
AliExpress is a...
No, see, AliExpress doesn't do that. I've bought things from AliExpress because basically all AliExpress is you're buying secondhand. Well, because Alibaba is the official website. AliExpress is the consumer-friendly version, but Alibaba is basically just a website that connects where manufacturers in China, mostly, not exclusively, but mostly, advertise their stuff. So it's like if you own a company and you need this kind of stuff,
is knockoff versions.
Not necessarily. I've bought cheap jewelry that isn't a knockoff of anything fancy. It's just a unique kind of thing that I don't see made anywhere else.
Sure. I mean, I suppose that has.
Wish is the same thing, but Wish I think is the far more scammy of the two. AliExpress is a little bit more honest, where it's like, yes, you're buying this from China. It's going to take 4 weeks to get there.
Yeah.
So you know what's happening, whereas Wish is like, here's a Apple product we promise. Don't look too close.
Don't look too close. It's not got any branding on it. Because it's...
Yes, indeed, it is a pear on the back. It was a manufacturing mix-up. I actually think that there's something... It would be funnier if China did that. Embrace the, 2000s Nickelodeon-ness. Where they would put an obviously wrong symbol on the back of a computer because we all knew that they were faking an Apple. I actually would get one of those stickers and have a real Mac and put the fake pear on it that they had on Drake and Josh, where the fake computer was the pear with a bite out of it. I'm like, that's funny at least. It's clever. I'm out of ammo.
Well, okay. Another great example of that, there is a watch company that I actually think is hilarious that makes watches that look like Rolexes, but they literally call them Relax. And
that's not as clever though.
But it's hilarious because their logo is the same as a Rolex, except it's got some sort of broken section, like one of the crown tips is like. And
they're trying to be in on the joke in the process.
They are, but again, if you don't, it's a bit of a okay. I'm willing to give you a pass simply because you're being a bit tongue in cheek, but it's when you try to actually get away with it, and again, it's disingenuousness is really what I have a problem with, and it sounds like you do too. It's like again.
Disingenuousness? Disingenuineness.
No, disingenuous.
It's on tape.
I just said disingenuousness.
Well, whatever.
But again, it's...
Who's needling me butt?
Yourself?
Getting needled in the butt.
You're needling yourself in the butt. Get yourself ganked.
Get needled.
I just bit off more than I could chew.
Well, I'm dead, so you're chewing alone, pal.
I'm chewing all by myself. This is a Mondo meal up here.
This is a beard meets food competition up in here.
Anyway, again, for people too, don't try to pretend like you're something you're not. That bothers me a lot.
Yeah, you're a poet.
It's wow.
You weren't aware.
Oh wow. It not only makes you look stupid, but everybody else in the room feels uncomfortable because now we have to deal with your stupidity.
Now we have to deal. Well, what's the quote that's stupid people don't know they're stupid, it's only the people around them?
Yeah.
And if you don't know it, you're the stupid person.
That's my favorite is the crazy people don't know they're crazy. I know I'm crazy, therefore I'm not crazy. Isn't that crazy?
Well, I guess this is episode 2 now.
Is it?
That's been long enough, and that was a natural cadence in the conversation. What will we talk about next? A bunch of bollocks, apparently. Or whose bollocks should we talk about next? Mine or yours? Or do you have a neutral third party?
Well, we already talked about Bill Clinton.
We talked about Martin Luther's, too.
I don't think we talked about his bollocks. Oh, did we? We talked about the fact that he had a massive
He had a pair of them.
scrote. How much
How much scrote could a
no. How much scrote could
How much scrote could a Protestant pack of a Protestant could well,
Okay,
there's your
coming out swinging apparently.
Well, that's what they do, the Protestants.
It's also what scrotes do.
That's what I was following up. I caught the
yes,
joke.
Oh dear.
Anyway.
When did we initially make that joke? The scrote bag.
It was last week, I'm pretty sure.
Was it?
I don't know if it was on air or not. I haven't edited that video yet. I don't actually know what we're doing.
How much? No, seriously. How much pushback is healthy without being
rupturing your scrote.
No, I mean, like on a both a political and a religious level.
How many hours is too many hours?
5 is apparently what the doctors have deemed. I'm simply saying, can I get in here? No, I can't.
Can you?
It's
With your massive scrotum.
It's just the grunts.
Now your scrotum is only the size of a regular sized scrotum.
It's not in your scrot, it's in my hand.
Oh, no! No! Don't finish that.
Okay. I'm so within like making all these characters that we've been.
I don't think you realize what you've just done.
What?
Well, because I can't help but finish it mentally, and it's worse.
It's much worse.
Where's the bad fella?
He's right here. I just whipped him in the
Gross.
face. The question is, we've been talking about historic figures, and obviously there
Have
are
we?
certain people that make impact in a positive manner, even though they have been maligned maybe on a intention level by history later on. But I mean, there's clearly a line in which you can push back against a given cultural norm or zeitgeist and not overdo it. But I wonder what that line is.
So does everyone. I don't
Because
exactly. You think
we've
we're gonna?
talked
You
about
think in the
Hegel.
state? We just
In the state
we were just
we're
talking
in.
about scrotums. You think we're capable of talking about this competently right now?
Well, I mean,
What? How big is too big.
How big is too big? You gotta have one in order to understand how to use it.
I mean, I
That's all I'm
suppose,
saying.
obviously, yes. If you don't have one, how are you gonna know?
I mean, as friends.
Oh dear.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think we've shot ourselves in the foot or the scrot in terms of making any kind of commentary worth listening to now. I don't know what the line is.
He was biting my line.
I don't even know where we're going next in the game.
I'm kind of stuck too. I can't figure out our way out of here. How do we get out of here?
I would guess it has something to do. Oh, there's an arrow on the floor.
I have followed that into
And it
nowhere,
leads in circles.
as does life.
That's one big circle.
I'm gonna do it all in a
The
spit.
more you know. There we go. Arrows leading out. There we go. Game design.
We finally got it.
Hey, it's an elevator.
You know, the game that I miss is GoldenEye. Because you could just
Well, if we had a
stack-
component cable, we could record that. What kind of elevator is this? I'm calling OSHA. Elevators with crevices with no railings. I'm suing for that. Me and my previous life. That would be a great thing. I want to see those lawsuits. The otherkin lawsuits.
the other kin.
It's... Don't look it up.
Okay.
It's
That
it's not
sounds
actually... I don't...
awfully
It's,
cryptic.
well, as far as I understand,
It
it's
was
not
a
a...
rabbit hole you fell down with.
I don't believe it's inherently a deviant thing, but it seems stupid nonetheless. It's essentially this idea that's like, in the past, the whole past life meme was if that was real. It's like people who are convinced that they were something in their past life. So I just imagine being like, I fell off an elevator in my past life and I demand a lawsuit. Because we live in an age where that could almost happen.
Pretty sure it's gonna happen. Actually.
Well, it all went downhill from that stupid McDonald's coffee one.
But okay.
You gonna defend it? I think it
Oh,
was.
certainly not. What part of me saying?
Well, you were hesitant when you were like, okay, and I was like, was that sounded
I
like you
wonder
disagreed
whether
but didn't
it
want to
was
get into
even-
it.
No, I wonder whether it was even real.
Did it happen? I'm pretty sure it did.
Well, or was it just a thought experiment that people ran with?
I guess
We
it could
should
be.
sue McDonald's for their hot coffee. It is hot. Yes.
Oh, who knows? I just miss the days. There's a picture of the development of the bulletproof vest, and the way they tested it is a guy wore it and they shot him. And I'm like, that wouldn't happen today. And that's dumb. It should happen today. Because it's just like this idea that, wow, work safety, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, that's... I don't know. Too much nannying.
Well, that I certainly think anyone would agree with. That is.
Well, certainly, apparently not everyone, because...
Well, that's because they live in a nanny state.
Well, yeah, but why do we do that? It's because apparently some people want it that way.
Nobody wants it that way.
Middle-aged white women want it that way.
No, I'm gonna agree with Jordan Peterson and say even middle-aged white women don't want it that way. They just think they do.
Well, but then that's the problem.
I agree. It is a problem.
Okay, because that... Well, here...
Give in to your. I'm just.
They
gonna
do-
Stop
here's-
right
I'm of the
there 'cause
opinion-
I would have gone a really weird.
They
place
do,
with that.
but see, that's the thing is they advocate for it, therefore they do want it because they're acting on it. They may not. It may not be to their benefit. That's I think what Jordan Peterson means.
Well, it also doesn't. It certainly doesn't align with their natural proclivity.
Yeah, but apparently we're not allowed to
It's-
follow that these
But
days.
again, it's unnatural.
They have. Scrotus. So that's oh yes, Corvac. Some of them do.
I think you're gonna get into some. Why is it that? I mean, we
What's
were, we
the
were even
deal
talking.
with these people?
They have scrotes. Why they have scrotes?
Whose is this Scroto?
Well, I mean, we got into it the other day, obviously, on a less...
Did you now?
On a less
Phallic?
phallic level and more of a serious level. But we were talking about even just like the disparity of pay and all this kind of...
Oh, you're talking
And there's a part of me that goes, for some reason, middle-aged white women have it in their heads that we get paid more because we have scrotes.
That's it. It's the scrotum.
It's the scrote. It's the power of the scrote.
It's the tax benefit for scrote havery.
Which is absurd. I mean, when you say it out loud,
it's step
and
2.
Bring it out.
They don't tell you this, ladies, but on the mail tax return, step 1, get out scale. Step 2, crouch to this angle of the knee. Report the weight in this box. You earn this much.
It's
scrote tax. I got my scrote tax now.
It's actually a deduction. It's a dependent.
How many children do you have?
How many children can you possibly have?
There's the one clause which is actual dependence. The second clause is hypothetical dependence.
Hypothetical dependence based on the weight of your scrote.
The problem is, even if you're an average man, the answer's in the thousands. What was it they said? Genghis Khan probably fathered more than like 10,000 illegitimate children. He had the highest tax. As a matter of fact, he got to claim most of Asia as his dependence.
Which explains how he got where he was, doesn't it? Scrote sag. Oh dear.
I am single-handedly cleaning up.
But seriously,
Now you're gonna but seriously, are you? I think we're long past that.
Well, no, I'm not gonna seriously argue, but I am gonna say this. I think...
I'm being hypothetical with my but seriously.
The disparity in pay is not the issue. And I'm just gonna...
It's that you're getting paid at all is the issue.
Oh my gosh! That's not what I said. First it was an argument, now it's just an insult. No, I think the issue is not that. It's why there's a disparity.
It's why you're getting paid.
It's why you're getting paid less. Because the point is not...
The point is you suck at what you do.
The point is not you're a man and I'm a woman. The point is I know something that you don't. And vice versa.
Whoa. Here we go.
We're getting into it now. The point is not that I simply look like I have male genitalia. It's that I actually do. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, goodbye, everyone. Just so you know, this will be the last episode.
And this is actually clickbait.
The YouTube strike teams will be here any minute. We don't get demonetized anymore. They'll just send the frighteners around. Expect next week's video from a hospital bed. We will both have broken knees.
All I'm saying is, I am good with disparity as long as...
I am good with my scrotum.
As long as it is for skill set or years served or something that makes sense in that particular field. And even the years served is a hard argument. Emphasis on the hard. Because, I mean, even that, again, you have teachers that end up getting tenure and then they stop trying and then it's terrible and they shouldn't teach anymore. So I don't specifically like that concept either. I think that the bottom line is your pay should be directly equivalent to what you're contributing, which is what we're back to the whole concept.
Here you go. Here's a topic.
I full circled it.
Here's a topic that interests me because it's one that came up recently.
I fear that this is not going to be as serious as I was hoping.
It will be. I just had to take a moment. There was one, because it's the same. It's the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, which I talk about a lot. And there was actually, they had a guy on that they were talking with, and one thing that he brought up a downside to meritocracy that people don't often consider, which is essentially the accidental downside of meritocracy is excessive class mobility.
But that's okay.
Yeah, well, you see, you'd think that, and I mean, obviously, our whole modern society is built around that, so we take that as given that it's a positive. But he says, for all its benefits, the one massive downside of it is class stratification, because when class, well, no, not exactly, because that has consequences that we don't yet know how to deal with.
How so?
Well, because what the example he gave is you're saying, okay, when class was an admittedly kind of arbitrary thing, what class you were born into was kind of the class you were stuck with, that didn't stop there from being different levels of competency within the same class.
Right.
So if you were, because I mean, some, like genetically speaking, a high percentage of things like intelligence or certain capabilities have at least a strong genetic link, even if they're not strictly determinist.
Sure.
So if you come from a family of reasonably intelligent people, then even if you're lower class, you have a higher. You obviously are limited. Your class limits your ability to achieve certain things, but you could certainly reach the top of your class ceiling, as it were. Which means maybe you'd be, the foreman of a factory back in, Victorian England times. Or you'd be a local police constable. It's like you'd be, yes, lower class, but you would still, there was stratification within that class.
Okay.
And the existence of people within the lower class of high capability gave a sense of structure to the whole system. Okay. Whereas in a system where you have high class mobility, the smart people who could become doctors and lawyers and go from the low to the middle to the high class, essentially anyone who is capable of becoming high class will. Yes. Which means the only people left in the lower class are those not capable. Well, in less blunt terms, yes. Which means the lower class, essentially, it lives up to the expectations socially put upon it. And there's more holes in the floor without railings! So essentially, the argument was the existence of people who could have been upper or low or middle class, but who were stuck in the lower class because of the class system. They provided a sense of order because, in a way, they became... Essentially, each class would then subdivide into its own high, middle, and low. So even if you were a low class, you could be a factory foreman or something equivalent where people would look to you as the model of, like, that's the guy you want to be like. You want to try to be like him.
Yeah, but there's still that. I mean...
Yes, to an extent, but the point is those people are no longer in their communities because they've raised their class and they're now outside of their communities, which means there is essentially... all the role models get sucked into one class, and the lower class then is left with nobody who they should emulate, which is what leads to cycles of crime and essentially misaligned priorities because there isn't anyone setting a kind of standard. You didn't want to be like the factory foreman or the local police constable because he's, a lawyer or a doctor or a judge somewhere, and he's no longer in the community being a role model to everybody, which means... essentially, it condemns the low class to remain low class, whereas back in the day, there wasn't class mobility in the sense of going from low to middle to high,
sure,
but there was mobility within the class. So you might have been a lower class person, but if you followed good role models and applied the right lessons, you could at least move up to being the high end of the low class, which was better than... And I mean, I guess the hard thing is it's essentially saying... It feels insensitive to say it would be better off for you to be the top of a low class than to be the bottom of a high class. But, his argument wasn't even that was the case. He was just saying this is a downside we haven't acknowledged, which is why we're in the position we're in, is because we don't know how to deal with the level of stratification we have where class mobility has almost led to greater class determinism, where the low class is going to stay and in fact worsen rather than because all the good people come out of it and all the people that are left are stuck. Oh, that's you. I just saw the invisible thing and thought it was a threat. So I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. He wasn't saying that makes meritocracy a problem. He was just saying this is a side effect that no one's willing to talk about or deal with. And fair enough.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of my response to it too. Is just okay, fair enough. But the antithesis of that would be significantly worse, in my opinion.
Is it though, or have you just been told that it would have been worse? Because that's the question of revisionist history. Is it's like people.
Well, I guess you have an argument.
People think of the Middle Ages. You have to push A. People think of the Middle Ages as being as being the Dark Ages, but that more and more as historical. I'm not sure what the field is, but like as literary historians learn more about that era of the past, you begin to realize that, oh, I lost my rocket launcher. You begin to realize that in many ways the stigmatization of the Middle Ages as a Dark Age is itself a form of postmodern bias against the past. Because there was actually I mean, you don't want to go too far and be like, the Middle Ages weren't actually all that bad, because of course they had their problems. But they certainly weren't the kind of just everyone was filthy and no one knew how to read and people died when they were 20. It's like these are all gross exaggerations of the conditions. Because I mean, the simplest one that people often misunderstand is the concept of life expectancy. It's like you realize that's still an average. When you say the life expectancy was 30, that didn't mean the average person dropped dead at 30. It meant most children died at 2. Yeah. And then the rest of the people who lived to be, maybe 50 or 60, which is younger than it is now. But it's still possible to die at 60 these days. So the idea that's like, oh, I'm 30, I'm about to drop dead, it's like that isn't exactly how it worked.
Well, and it's also not somehow correlative to age purely. Again, that's what I'm getting at, is that there's so many other factors that play into these kinds of things. Like, in that particular regard, medicine was probably not quite as
obviously. So if you caught a nasty disease when you were 30, it could have killed you.
Right.
But it wasn't like, I'm 30, drop dead.
Exactly.
Because that's how people act, where it's just like, I've reached my 30s and now it's time to die. It's like, well, that isn't how it wasn't like that. And people, like the age-old misconception is like, people in the Middle Ages weren't literate. It's like, no, most people in the Middle Ages could read. They just could only read their local language, which wasn't codified the way we are now. And also literacy in that sense was at the time determined by essentially the ability to read Latin. So if you couldn't read Latin, there were some texts that would count you as illiterate, or like censuses. What's the censi?
Censes. I think it's just census.
So you would be considered not literate because you weren't like educated in the language of, what scholars would read. But if you, for example, are a blacksmith or even a farmer to a certain extent, there's reasons and benefits to knowing how to read, if only for the sake of keeping track of your own affairs. If you're a farmer, you're also having to be a businessman. So you had to at least be able to keep some account or record of your dealings. It's just that you could probably only read the local dialect in your area, which may have been significantly different from other areas. So the idea is that, people weren't literate in that they couldn't have read the books that were around, because the only books that were around were in languages for basically priests and scientists, and that was it.
And this highlights a bit of a gap that I think is, I wish that there was a way of closing this, but the notion that scholasticism is the sole kind of determiner for intelligence is a shame. Because it's a little bit of a tangential topic to the whole idea of blue collar versus white collar or whatever it is, or blue collar versus maybe college
back
degree.
in that day, an education was harder to attain, so that was reasonably regarded as valuable.
Well, it's valuable.
In the modern day, it's actually not at all hard
rare.
to attain a degree, therefore it means very little.
Well, I think also true, though.
I think we got a save point.
Also true, though, is that there's still this notion
These guys walk around, they kind of trundle.
Smart individuals most of the time, and I'm not, and this is completely unqualified, so if you don't agree with it, that's okay, so I'm not, but most of the time, smart people are measured, I suppose, by their intellect based on scholasticism.
Well, certainly. I once made in a journal I wrote, not
in a journal I
that sounds
wrote
far
and
more
published
academic.
myself.
That sounds far more academic. I mean, in a literal, I wrote it on a piece of paper for my own pontification.
Like, oh, gotcha, like your own, like, private.
But I was saying that it used to be the case that the only qualification you needed for doing something was the ability to do it.
Right.
Now you have to have a paper that someone else writes thinking you can do it, which, admittedly, sometimes, at least the way it's supposed to work, is that person who gives you that paper knows that you can do it.
Well,
But that is not always a guarantee. Whereas back in the day, you didn't have to have a degree. You just had to demonstrate you knew how to do it.
Which, to me, it depends on the context. So, take martial arts, for instance. In its heyday, especially within the Chinese kung fu context, there used to be this notion of, okay, you wanted to open a school or you want to demonstrate that, like, you want to teach and your particular style is worth its salt or what have you. You literally go and say anybody that wants to, to challenge or prove that or let me demonstrate that is welcome to challenge me or fight me, and I will prove that.
Hey yo, come on.
There's a part of a romantic draw to that says there is a.
Well, it's the beginnings of bureaucracy.
Is it?
When the ability to do something is not determined.
Oh
okay.
my word!
Give it a smack.
Okay.
All right, it's officially given up.
Oh, I shouldn't have smacked it. Now it's mad.
Come on now. All right, let me fly my banshee.
So, what were you saying? The
Whoop, whoop, whoop. Ah! Okay, I have to hold forward. I'm like a shark.
okay.
If I stop moving, I die.
And the what?
I don't know. Something about something. I've forgotten.
Very helpful.
It had something. It was poignant. I know it.
Well, because I was talking about again when you were saying it's the beginning of bureaucracy. And
Yes,
how
because essentially it's the rubber stamping of like you can't just demonstrate that you have to do it. You have to have someone sign off on your ability to do it.
Well, but that's not.
And back in the
That's
day,
not what I'm getting at. What I'm saying is in early kung fu culture, it was not someone has to sign off on this. It was just demonstrate it. If someone asks, you need to be willing to
Sure.
demonstrate it. I think that there's a far more grassroots level spread to proliferation at that point than to say, well, this other guy says I'm good. It's a bit of in a modern context, we put a lot of stock in
what other people say.
well, that's certainly true, but I was meaning more the appeal of what is it called, the
I do have
the
torpedoes.
expert appeal. That, like, we put a lot of stock in that. Like, well, this guy says this. It's like, well, okay.
Who says? Yeah, who cares who he is?
Exactly. And it's amazing how often that flabbergasts people. Like, it completely almost undoes certain people's arguments.
Well, essentially, I mean, it's a fallacy, though. It's the argument
It
from
is, I
authority.
agree.
And it's also the converse is the argument from ignorance, saying, well, or not the argument from ignorance. I forget the name of it, but it's the opposite, saying, well, because he doesn't have this pedigree, he can't. His point must be invalid. It's like that's equally fallacious as saying he has this pedigree, therefore he's correct. It's dumb.
Well,
and
that's
basically
why I think getting back
it
to this
excuses
argument-
people to not think. Oh,
or to
no.
even tease out an idea.
Well, that's the crux of it, is that people don't think anymore.
There you go. People
Think.
walking around with scrotes, no brains.
Scrotes in their brains and,
Brains in their scrotes.
well...
Well, that's not untrue.
well, biologically it is.
Well, yeah, I'm talking
Metaphorically.
metaphorically speaking. Get off the side, you hunk of flesh.
That sounded almost like some peculiar robot slur.
What?
Step back, meat bag. That would actually be a hilarious satire in the modern day, was to start using the the approved
Okay, that man
genderqueer.
died and then resurrected. I watched him.
You need to start using the approved genderqueer language, but presented as being slurs from a robot overlord race.
What?
Yeah, well, it's like the whole concept of like, oh, it's not you're not a woman, you're a womb haver. It's like that sounds like a robot slur.
You womb haver, you.
It's just like we just start reframing it as though it's some kind of slur from the technological uprising.
Okay, pal. When someone blonks you on the head, you don't get to just walk away like it ain't.
Hey, who are you appealing to authority? You've got to blonk him hard enough. You're trying to say that simply because he's been blonked statistically, he should respond appropriately. You've got to demonstrate to him the blonkingness.
You've got get blonked. What just happened?
I became a posthumous astronaut.
Oh,
Who wants it?
He does. Right in the back.
Well, here it is. Here it is.
He
Oh.
just slipped you like a professional boxer. He floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee.
Nothing.
What?
I was going to try to work a scrote in there somehow, but
Don't do that.
then my proctologist recommended otherwise. Well, he's doing his job. I mean, come on. He's looking out for me. And all my hypothetical, what would he say? The hypothetical dependence. You're not living up to your potential, sir.
How many did he have?
Doesn't he read? We're going into. Well, it wasn't intended to go into south places, but it would have anyways. I was gonna say we are indiscriminately firing, and it seems to not be working.
We're prematurely shooting our loads. Come on.
I'm not gonna gratify that. Well, high-class commentary you're getting here, lads. Whoa, hello. Goodbye. Oh, I thought I got one of them. It's helpful that they have arrows on the ground, because otherwise I'd be lost. Oh, come now. What are you attempting?
Oh, not that.
Apparently that doesn't work.
Thought I would get out of your hair. But
Here's something people don't seem to know. Pepsi in Europe's better.
That's an interesting opinion. I know nothing about it.
Well, I remember, it's a weird thing, because you'd think...
It's not just in Vienna.
I suppose it could be, because I don't know that I was drinking it in Spain, but... Well, maybe then that's the case. I can't speak for all of Europe, I suppose. Vienna had better Pepsi than Coke, I'll say. But that makes it a far more specific and less useful argument than just...
Then Viennese people really know how to do the,
Well, they know about food. We'll give them that.
Well, that's certainly true.
I can say... I can say at
I didn't know you were thinking that. And I just was waiting for you to say it.
I can say that...
I can say...
Given my own... there's too many priors in this conversation is the problem. Can't be helped. Given my own proclivities, if I had to pick... If I lived in sort of early 1900s Europe, and I had to pick a place, if you could like... If this was my sort of...
You just shot a man's back.
I thought he might have been alive.
He looked like Hitler.
If I if I'm trying to now I'm trying to think of a hypothetical in which this would make sense to say. If you were to give me the whole option of like, you know, what is this? I am the covert agent. If you gave me the choice of like, all right, you're gonna go back in time, but you're not gonna remember. It's like you're gonna live a life as though you were born in that era and we don't remember.
I have a feeling.
And if I had to, and I mean, if that era was chosen, because I'm not necessarily saying I would choose that era, but if that was like predetermined, I couldn't change that. But I could pick where. Vienna might be a place, because it's either that or London in that period, because those are the only places worth being. And perhaps that's me being an Anglo-Germano snob.
I think that's a fair argument. I mean, there's...
Are you coming or what?
No.
I'm getting in the elevator without you.
Well, I'm gonna zap to your butt in 2 seconds anyway, so that's my
Is
secret.
that what the kids call it these days? Whoa!
Or you could zap to mine.
Oh, well, you've worsened it. Why are you in charge? Whose butt is predominant here?
Do you mean your butt to my butt, or your individual butts?
No, I don't know how. I'm not sure I remember how to get back to where I was. Break a window. Break a wall. Okay. I think it was the glowing hallway.
No, I mean, there's... I don't think...
Because it was a hotbed of socio...
When?
In that
Not
sort of
that
early
it was-
1900s. In the sort of Edwardian era. Edwardian, of course, only refers to England at the time, but I mean, same years.
I certainly don't think it's without merit to say that there's a reason why Europe was a fairly big player, I suppose, in that particular era.
But you can't call Europe... I mean, sure, but I'm not talking about Europe as a whole. I'm talking about... I mean, I don't know enough of European history. Some people might say, actually, Antwerp in the year 17 whatever was far more... Who knows? I'm saying in that era, early 1900s, it seems to me...
I saw you right through your
that
little spacesuit.
Basically, the main cities in which philosophy and science and several other fields were growing at an accelerated rate were Vienna and London. And I don't know of any others. Maybe that's because I'm ignorant, or maybe it's because there weren't any others. Most likely, the former. So anyways, if I was getting sent back in this hypothetical scenario, I'd say put me in Vienna.
Take me to the river. I don't know that I don't know why this is, and I'm not specifically advocating for this notion because I think it's actually a bit of a problem. But I find that I separate Eastern and Western philosophies.
That's your post-communist
fairly...
brain.
What is that?
Oh, Eastern.
Well,
Oh, I thought you were going a different direction. I thought you were going to say something about Eastern and Western Europe. How are you getting onto this? We were talking about Europe.
No, well, no, but I'm meaning, like,
You want to be in 1900s China?
Well, I mean, there's a part of me that goes,
I'd almost rather be in, like, 500s China than 1900s China.
Sure, but I'm
Because you're going to have to deal with Mao. I don't want to deal with Mao.
Sure.
Mao's a coming for you.
He's coming.
It's the Chinese knockoff of 1984. It's not a Big Brother's watching, it's just Mao's a coming.
Mao's a coming.
Oh, Lord, he coming. Oh, hello. Hello. He sees me. Whoa!
No, I'm just saying,
Charge of the Light Brigade.
I don't know why I often make those two distinct, where you go, it's not...
The thing is, Asia in the 1900s was doing worse than it had in previous centuries. Like, Asia was actually doing better in much earlier history than it was in those eras.
Sure.
Even you could argue Russia. It's like a lot of that part of the world.
Psych! Take your own... I don't know.
Scrows. And feed it to yourself.
I will literally tear off. No, it's... I don't know why I do that. I think it's just because there's a part of me that feels that they are so distinct in their uniqueness of approach on a philosophical level that I don't think about them in the same time frame. But then you go in a modern context, of course you do, because they both exist within.
I wouldn't want to live in modern China either, to be honest.
Okay, but you still consider them to be like you. China is obviously its own.
Okay.
Oh my word.
Maybe switch back the other thing or something. I don't know what to do. He's laughing. Ah! Oh well.
What I'm getting at is that
that's a zoom
in
up.
a modern context, I don't specifically
I don't want to
disregard,
live in
not disregard, or disconnect Eastern culture from a modern context. I think obviously it contributes to the global.
Does it?
It does.
Japan's doing good stuff, and Korea, the South, I should say.
I'm not suggesting that everything they contribute is positive. I'm simply
okay. You're talking in the Kantian sense.
Yes.
Generically speaking, they're of significant contribution.
Yes,
Hitler also was making a very significant contribution to 1900s Europe.
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, in the term of significant, yes, strictly speaking.
Well, I had this conversation earlier with Danica because I was talking about making your impact in the world, and she was like, yeah, but that's not always a good thing. Stalin made his impact, and I said yes, and he probably didn't actually care that his impact was of fear-mongering. He probably didn't care.
I'm actually quite confident he didn't.
I think he may have appreciated it.
Now we're talking about back to Mao again, and how he's coming.
Well, but, okay. But what I'm getting at is, why is it that, I don't know why it is that when I'm thinking about historically, when I'm thinking, okay, this particular time frame, for some reason I separate Eastern and Western culture. I don't know why.
Well, what time frame though? Because that makes a difference.
Well, any time frame. Anytime I'm thinking back.
Well, probably because you're a Westerner, I suppose.
Well, that's probably true.
You probably don't know what was going on in China in the 1700s. I don't. I mean, I barely know what was going on in Europe in the 1700s. I'm an American. I don't have to care. What was going on in Europe in the 1700s is something my ancestors tried to get away from. That's the one thing, especially because I've been watching the Lotus Eaters, and they're obviously a British studio and all that. And I mean, they deal with international news, but they are obviously British in their sensibilities.
Fake news.
So I can't help but there's a part of it that's like, you know what? I do have an admiration for the British. I mean, more I'd say that goes beyond just the fact that as a post-British country, I would naturally have a certain degree of affinity, but it's like, but there's also something to be said for, they tease Americans a lot on purpose, even though, they joke that obviously a decent chunk of their audience is American.
Sure.
So it's good-natured, but there is still an element of like, if only we actually were as quintessentially American as we used to be in the 1700s, I think we'd actually be a culture worth saving. Because whatever we're trying to be now isn't worth keeping up with. It's like I feel like we almost need to go back to let's have both England and America go back to what they were in the 1700s. I mean, they can keep their hands off of us, but they can have everything else back. I don't know. I'd be in support of the British Empire again. That's put me on a list, I'm sure. I mean, again, they can't have us again. But I mean, they basically have Canada. They could do better with Canada than what Canada's doing with itself.
Wow.
You know it's true.
I don't know that I know that.
Haven't you seen the Don't Trudeau on Me flags? They're hilarious.
No.
It's funny to me. The whole it was in the past couple of years. Canada's gone from, the country that everyone likes for being friendly and known for nothing but non-conflict, to the sole dictatorship of North America. It's like, no one saw this coming. I mean, everyone thought the cartel would take over Mexico before Canada ever had the slightest conflict, much less, it's like, oh no, yeah, full-on, dictatorial oppression. Canada! Not what people think.
That's true. Oh!
You're alive. It's me who's dead.
But Okay.
I could smack you in the butt if that would help. Give you the football pat. Oh, you're saying...
Oh.
What? Oh.
Happened.
What?
Don't know what's happening.
I guess we've triggered the next plot event. 4:23. What?
It has been 26 hours since the sentients landed in Sector 1215.
Oh, okay, so this is plot.
Not until we can access the remains of their
Anyway.
Anyway.
not executed adequately.
All I'm saying is...
Maybe my chinkaboo is still just coming out a little bit.
I would not want to live in 1900s China.
I certainly would not have wanted to live with Mao. That's
During
true.
the violent landing,
Well, yeah, then... Well, that's
I wouldn't want to live in China either.
That's the...
locations along the road.
Well, that's the era you're talking about. So it's
No,
like...
I
I mean,
was
it's like, yeah, I wouldn't mind living in Russia at certain periods of history, but anything after the 1890s, I'm like, nope, I'm leaving.
If they're still there,
Hey, maybe Mao was a family man. Maybe as long as you were inside of his...
Quite the opposite.
I'm joking! Obviously!
to its proper cadence.
Well, I don't know. I'm not aware of... I don't know how much of Chinese modern history you know. I thought you were an ancient Chinese history
I
man.
certainly am that, but it almost is... It's almost specialized to the pulse of martial arts. I mean, I don't know that I know outside of that. There's some things, but not...
I know very little. I know some about Japan, but even then, like, even in the simple sense, like, I've watched Japanese movies from the 40s, and it's like, oh, wow. Japan in the 40s was, like, not where the West was in the 40s, and I'm not trying to say that as, like, insulting. I mean, I guess you'd say the 40s. Obviously, that was a period of significant upheaval, but even still, it's like, okay, there were the cities, which were very modern, and then there was the country, which was like, not at all.
Well, yeah.
They were still living in the 1700s. It's like, it's fascinating. Part of the reasons I find some of these movies fascinating is because it's like, I have no context for what this country was like in that period of, I don't even know what it's like now, much less what it was like then.
Yeah,
So-
but there's still... I mean, people could get into various parts of, like, sects of Amish culture here and be like, people here are really weird. They're
Yeah,
still living
but
in
that's-
the 1600s.
Yeah, well,
They're churning
actually,
their
but see,
own
but that's
butter.
actually not true. If you read up on the Amish, they're not they're not as strict in the anti-technology sense as people think, because they do actually have.
Depends on the group.
That's probably true, but it's essentially they have a healthy kind of distrust of technology, but they are not strictly, they're not Luddites in that sense. Where it's like a lot of Amish businesses will actually have
they're
electrical
luddy.
tools. It's like the idea that, they're, the Amish furniture makers are all working by hand. It's like, there's probably some of them.
Well,
But they also have
those
electricity in these places, but it is exclusively for business. It's like they delineate clearly between the personal and the sort of commercial lives. So it's like, okay, yeah, you use the technology that makes sense for this application, but they're still very guarded about it in the personal life.
Who determines that is the question.
I don't know. I think they've probably got some kind of community leadership of some variety. But I'm just saying, like, even in the modern day, there are several Amish communities. In fact, a decent chunk of them have computers, but like a handful for the whole group. It's like there will be maybe like a school or a community center, and there will be like one or a few.
I need to send an email.
And again, and it's like, and they won't be in the house, and it's like, in all honesty, that's only a handful of notches above what I think would be the healthy medium. I think we should go back to people having one computer in the house that was always in one room,
Well, that I agree with.
rather than everyone's got two that they have, in their pocket or on their person. It's like, that's too much computer. I think back when we had one in the middle of the sort of tech room, that was fine. You're seriously going to take down a tank with that thing? You might as well spit at it.
I am spitting that.
What do you think I'm doing? You're confusing it, apparently.
What's that from?
Imagine a cockroach when you tried to smack it just started spitting at you. That's what's going on here.
But I'm saying, what episode of Homestar is that when he does
it's
the...
one of them. One of them is all I can say.
One of them.
He's just what? At this point, I don't even think he's threatened. Oh, okay, now he is. I think he was just watching you, going, "What is this guy doing? Look at him fumble with that.
Look at him fumble with that. I gotta take a picture. He's trying to shoot my front end."
I don't know. The Edwardian era is a good one, I'd say. Aesthetically speaking, I certainly agree.
Going to need the firepower.
Sort of pre-World War I, before things went to pot. I mean, in a manner of speaking, things went to pot in different ways. But,
You know,
pot, there's something to be said for pot.
wow. What does that actually mean? Does it mean like the equivalent of your goose is cooked when everything goes to pot?
Well, it could be, or I mean, perhaps it refers to a chamber pot.
Ooh.
It all goes to pot.
I
As in
suppose that's
it all goes
possible.
into that pot.
Yeah, that one over there. No, not the other one. That one's for cooking.
I can't imagine that would have been a mistake people could have made, but
Well, I mean, if you boil it, probably good.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't
Okay.
even if you did do that.
I'm joking. Eat lead. Eat lead.
Here we go.
Evidently, they eat lead.
It's-
It's okay.
I mean, it sounds familiar, but I can't remember what it is.
Eat lead, robot scum. Oh, evidently they eat lead.
What is it though?
It's from Monsters vs. Aliens. It's a dumb.
Okay. Here's a statement I won't attach any allegiance to, but we'll discuss.
So that you can have zero culpability for
Well,
what?
someone made the argument, and I'm not sure I agree, but I think there's a case, is that human society peaked on September 10th, 2001. And ever since then, things have gone down. And to be honest, I get where they're coming from. Because essentially the early to late 2000s, and then certainly the 2010s and on. I mean, the 2010s and on is the easy, like, okay, yeah, things have definitely been downhill since then. But the reason things were downhill since then is largely due to the early 2000s. And whether or not you attribute it truly to a post 9/11 thing, maybe there's an argument. Maybe you could quibble. But certainly, I think, regardless, there's a case to be made. You have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think that an event such as that is going to obviously leave a mark of significant. I would suppose I would call it a pyre or a kind of
The entrance to the control center is located on top of the pyramid.
altar moment, I suppose, if I could use a Old Testament term. But to say, okay, this is a marked date in which things from this point on are never the same. But I don't know that it's because somehow culture or technology or anything like that had peaked as much as it is. Like, we're still almost recovering. And I mean, maybe that's being too forgiving. But I mean, I feel like there's a part of it that even just take something like the fact that we are still just now kind of ending, and even then arguably people would say we haven't yet, the war in the Middle East. It's like, okay, well that was significant, and that did change a great deal. And so obviously money, effort, time, all those kinds of things go into it. And so, I mean, it's certainly been affected, but I don't know that I would agree that it peaked.
What do
Maybe.
you think it peaked?
Well, I don't don't know. I would like to think that peak is still yet ahead.
If I...
but-
Okay, maybe the next one in 100 years. I don't think we're going to get back to... I mean, fine, we'll call it a local peak if you're going to be pedantic
then
about it.
If you're gonna define it that way, I suppose then we peaked in the 20s.
See, no, I wouldn't say that. I mean, some people, you could make a case for the 50s.
Okay,
Because the
I'll
60s
level with
ruined
you
a
there.
lot.
Yeah, no, that's true.
But I also
The
feel like
50s
things
I'll
were all
grant
right in
you.
the 80s. So, I mean, I think we recovered from the
Not-
60s.
Did we though?
Maybe not fully.
Yeah, I was about to say, dang boomers.
Yeah, but I mean, the
kidding.
90s seemed like an all right time as much as I barely lived through them.
No, they weren't.
Yeah, good films came out. Culture seemed all right.
Good
We had
films.
we had technology
It
that
was the
didn't take over our
beginning-
lives.
But it was also the beginning of sneaky cultural games and propaganda.
Was it really though? Because the
It
90s
was.
like that went where?
Go back. There's a whole documentary on Nickelodeon in the 90s that's very disturbing.
Okay, but that's not sneaky cultural. That's just about people being sick, and I mean, people have always been sick.
Well, yeah, I
So
suppose,
so I
yeah.
don't think that that's the same thing. Because that's not saying this is how Nickelodeon tried to trans your kids in the 90s. It's like this is just how one guy was a creep and we didn't do anything about it.
Well, people turned a blind eye.
Well, yeah, so is Jimmy Savile in the 70s in England. It's like there's always scandals that don't get talked about until too late. But I wouldn't say that means that that's like a subversion. It's just
Going to need the firepower.
you're probably right in that a lot of the things culturally that we're dealing with are 60s era. I mean, wokeism begins in the 60s, you could argue. Not under that banner, and not necessarily in the same framework, but
Well, but
I mean, honestly, and if we want to be really concise,
okay,
clear about
I am
it.
shooting your back fat, pal.
Yeah, you're using a pea shooter, though. What do you think? If we really had to talk about the beginning of it, you'd have to go back to Rousseau and how he should have choked on his own umbilical cord.
Wow. And all the Rousseauians can go and screw themselves.
Well, probably already have.
Wow.
I'm just saying, Rousseau, Marx. I can't think of a third that I would eliminate from history if I could. Woodrow Wilson. There you go. I've cleaned up all of history forever.
I think you forgot a pretty significant player there, sir.
Oh, you get rid of Rousseau and Marx, you probably don't even have any of the others.
Well, maybe that's true.